The subject of cash flow planning is increasingly recognized as being very important for individuals around the world, but as far as I'm concerned, and as far as Ipanema Wealth is concerned, we help many expatriates in Latin America with precise budgeting and cash flow planning. When I say expats in this case, I mean professionals who are on finite contracts, usually with multinationals. And that means they're usually going to be moving from one country to another over the course of their career. So they need to have a strategy in place which can be modified, but they've got to have base points and reviews over the course of their career to ensure that they will meet their financial objectives. When it specifically comes to cash flow planning, my colleagues and I have personally advised executives in Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, and the Caribbean region. Now, there's a bit of confusion about expats, long-term foreign residents, but in this particular video, I'd like to focus more on expats. And when I say expats, I mean those who are on contracts with multinational companies with temporary or even longer-term benefits, like having their accommodation covered, certain tax-free components to their salary, and then the likelihood of moving every 3 or 4 years. So they tend to have their assets scattered, and they need some fine tuning. Sometimes they need a whole rework of their financial planning, but sometimes it's just fine tuning. And bear in mind, fine tuning on several elements of financial planning can have a significant impact if we extend that out by 10 or 20 years. So with any cash flow modeling, we break it into the flow itself. So looking at income. What are the components of income? It's usually employment income, investment income, rental income, potential windfalls in the future, inheritances. If they happen, they happen. But the idea is to focus on the more foreseeable components of income. And expenses. So leisure expenses, household expenses, differentiating between the fixed costs and the discretionary costs. So looking at those. Then we move on to assets, so things like property, things like pension, things like investment accounts. So we break them all down and we project growth rates for each asset. We have to look at exchange rates as well, because we find it useful to say, what would that all be worth if we convert it to dollars? Or what is it like if we keep them in 2 separate pockets, like dollars and pounds, or dollars and Brazilian reals, so we can look at it more objectively and make decisions on each currency pocket. Now, when I talk about long-term lifestyle goals like retirement, whether it's an early retirement or a, let's say, normal retirement, what is the normal retirement age? 65, 70? It seems to be going up, at least according to most governments. But if you can plan for an early retirement, why not? And if you can take out some unnecessary expenses, some avoidable expenses in the short term, and reallocate that to saving, that can make a significant difference in the future. So it is worth doing this exercise and reviewing it periodically to make sure that you're on track, or at least heading to where you want to be in the future. Now, with global expats who tend to work in multiple locations over the course of their careers, we find that periodic reviews are even more important given exchange rate variations, inflation, right, especially over the last 3 years. I mean, that wasn't expected in 2019. No one would have been able to foresee that, right? Asset growth rate as well. I mean, the stock market's been very volatile since then. It always is, but it's been more volatile than usual since 2020. And that's probably affected people's projections regarding when they can retire, if they may have to delay or bring forward their potential retirement date. And if you think about it, fixed income fell in 2022 in tandem with equity markets, and that hadn't been seen for decades. So that would have also affected retirement objectives. And then, of course, moderate changes in any of those variables, so exchange rates, inflation, asset growth rate, moderate changes over a long period can have a substantial effect on future goals, especially if we're planning, let's say, 10 or 20 years ahead. Let's take an example. I mean, what if you're planning to transfer assets out of Brazil? Let's say you're planning to go to the UK to retire, or move to the UK, move to France, move to the US for whatever reason. And then the Brazilian real weakened. So let's say you're planning to transfer a large portion of your assets out of Brazil in March or April 2020, you would have been hit by a significant depreciation of the Brazilian real. So that's another thing about cash flow planning. You're doing a lot of what-if analysis to make sure that you're sufficiently diversified to protect your future goals and location changes. And I haven't even touched upon other significant lifestyle changes. What if you receive a good bonus? What do you do? How do you invest that? What if you suffer temporary or longer-term unemployment, which has happened in many sectors, like oil and mining. That happened halfway through the previous decade, and that affected a lot of people's financial planning. What if you have another child? What if you have twins? That's going to change everything. We need to get to that cash flow model and make some adjustments, right? So it's all about aiming for a happier and financially more secure lifestyle, whilst preparing for uncertainties and building a strategy for how to deal with them. I hope that was useful. Follow the links in the description of this video. Cheers.